Hello, everyone. Welcome to this third episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. Lately, I was guided to watch the movie, the Matrix trilogy again. For whatever reason, I didn't really understand why, but I watched it. I really liked it when I was younger. And sure enough, there was some interesting food for thought to push some of the ideas I've developed in my other videos a little further. So first of all, let me show you an extract from the second episode of Matrix, which I really think will serve to discuss some ideas later on. So here in this extract, Neo goes to see the Oracle, which is one of my most favorite characters in the Matrix, and she proposes him to take a candy, and you'll see what happens next, and then I'll comment on this extract afterwards.
Just have to make up your own damn mind to either accept what I'm going to tell you or reject it. Candy?
You already know if I'm going to take it.
Wouldn't be much of an oracle if I didn't.
But if you already know, how can I make a choice?
Because you didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. You're here to try to understand why you made it. I thought you'd have figured that out by now. You've seen it. In your dreams, haven't you? A door made of light. What happens when you go through the door?
I see Trinity. And something happens. Something bad. She starts to fall. And then I wake up.
Do you see her die?
No.
You have the sight now, Neo. You are looking at the world without time.
Then why can't I see what happens to her?
We can never see past the choices we don't understand.
Are you saying I have to choose whether Trinity lives or dies?
No. You've already made the choice. Now you have to understand it.
No. I can't do that. I won't.
You have to,
Why?
because you're the one.
What if I can't? What happens if I fail?
Then Zion will fall.
So that extract was very interesting because, as I've discussed in many other videos, past, present, future, if all of it exists at the same time, then all choices also exist at the same time. Which means as you're watching this video and you ponder whether to lift your right hand up or your left hand up, both of those choices exist. But you'll get to experience one of them. Or you can lift both hands. But what I mean is that there's only so many things that you can experience in any sort of given eternal present where you're at. And what the Oracle said was really, really interesting. That the choice was already made, and that you are only here to understand your choices. And also, when looking at the future, she says you can't see past the choices you don't understand. And that really, when I listened to those words, I had really the chills. And it's really interesting because in the end, it's true. Which choice do you get to experience then in the end? If all choices have been made, you've made the choice, for instance, to lift both your right hand and your left hand because both of them exist. The choice you get to experience is the one that you understand. So it's almost like remembering why you made certain choices. And you can either remember or understand doing one choice or understand doing another. And in that sense, free will is almost like retroactively justifying the choices you make and then experiencing them. So you could say that's free will because in the end, everything exists. So you could say that any and all possible futures exist. And you've made the choice from any point in the present. You made the choice to experience all of them potentially. But the one future you will get to experience is the one that you understand, which means you can retroactively sort of justify and explain why you've made that choice. Of course, this doesn't necessarily apply to simple things like lifting one hand or another, because those are more. You could justify also certain choices just saying that it's random. But how about important life choices, like choosing a career path or choosing to marry someone? We always have our reasons. We always have reasons for justifying why we made those choices and not others. And so ultimately you could say that it's the justification of a choice that you haven't made yet that will make you experience that choice. I don't know if it's clear. It's still quite hazy in my mind, but this is truly mind-blowing in a sense, because if everything exists, then indeed you have to cater for the fact that you can justify all of the potential choices to lead you into that future and experience that future. And that's the free will rests more than in understanding retroactively the choices we've already made than in making choices in the present, so to speak. So it's this concept of remembering why you've made one choice out of an infinite number of choices. And if you remember and can justify why you've made a certain choice, then you'll get to experience that choice. So that's the one thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing I wanted to talk about is kind of linked to this. You've probably seen this little graph where I summed up the concept of no time and the fact that in infinity, everything is linked to everything else in this infinite causal chains. Infinite causal chains. That is, every single point in time is linked to everything. Like you moving your finger from your present is linked causally to every single possible past and every single possible future stemming from that moment. That is, the movement of the atom in your finger then can be seen as the beginning of a chain reaction which reverberates across all future timelines, and all past timelines lead to that very moment as well. So indeed, it's kind of every point is infinitely related to every other point. And so infinity, basically, that's why we loop it, because it all ends up looping on itself. But here, this was a very simplistic representation of how things are looped back on themselves. So you could see that here I said that basically aliens created us in the past. And then once we reach a technology where we can exist out of time, we create the aliens in the past, and so everything creates everything else. This is a kind of a very simplistic way of explaining things to facilitate the understanding. But I wanted to go a little deeper into how this works and take the example of your brain and neurons and how they're wired to one another. And if you ever seen neurons and how they're wired, you will have seen that it's a network, a complex network, where new connections can be made at any point in time. It's a complex mesh. It's a complex mesh with many connections. And I believe that the brain is actually an excellent model for understanding how time works, how infinity works, and how any given point in reality, any given moment in reality is linked to other moments. Just imagine that you want to tell a story, and you have and every neuron represents like one still image. Well, if I, for instance, trace this path and then going somewhere here, that makes sense. These neurons are connected. But I could also go like this, and that would also perfectly make sense. And you understand that, think of one of these neurons as, for instance, the morning you're sipping coffee in your kitchen, and here it's evening and you're going to bed. And this is the different possible futures that are ahead of you for that day, the different program. Like here, you take the car to go to work. Here, you decide to go by bike. And then you have different points. And you see that at certain points, those two timelines can cross and you can sort of merge onto another one, or you can continue on and have a different day. And at the end, they can also join back together and you can experience something else from there. I think this is much more representative of how timelines work, how the universe works, and how infinity is sort of wrapped around itself. Because every neuron in the brain is technically connected to every other neuron. It's all interlinked. But there are an infinite number of paths that you can take from one neuron leading to all others. And so when I'm saying that we created aliens, aliens created us, it's sort of it's an oversimplification of how infinity kind of links parts of itself to other parts. It's more like a brain. It's more like a sort of a network where it's not so, you cannot so easily identify causality and causality links, because you can create, and also in a brain you can create new connections, for instance, and this is how you can sort of retroactively change the past from your present, for instance, to enjoy another future. So you can gain another new understanding from your day or what happened, and that creates new neural links in your brain and changes completely what you get to experience in the future. And you could say that that's exactly how you change the past, is you change your past inside your brain. So you reinterpret or you rewrite kind of the memories that you had from one possible past, because obviously all pasts exist. It's just that you remember one past, you remember one version of the past amongst an infinite number of pasts from your present moment that you could have experienced. And by reinterpreting or rewriting what you've experienced in that one past and changing to a different one, it's as if you were rewiring in your brain the neural connections. And obviously, because you've rearranged the past in your brain, it also has an impact on what you'll experience in the future. And I think that You could then say that the universe is kind of brains nested one inside the other. Like each and every human is one neuron in the brain of the higher being that we call our the humanity's consciousness or something, global consciousness. You could say that that's kind of how it works, where each one of us is like one neuron inside that huge brain, and that brain is also one neuron in another infinite number of brains. That is humanity, all of humanity, which creates where each human is one neuron in that brain. That brain is also one brain amongst an infinite number of brains which represent aliens. So each alien race, you could say, is again, each member of that race is one neuron, and they are collectively working as a brain. And us, we're just one neuron that is now connecting to other ETs. It's like if we were this isolated neuron in the brain of all ETs in the galaxy, for instance, and we're gradually reaching out to connect to other neurons, and that will create and join the neural network of the galaxy, if you will, and that will enhance anything. When you make new neural connections in your brain, it enhances your creativity. You can learn new things. You can experience new things. It's like learning music, learning anything. And so our collective, joining the neural network of the galaxy and of the universe, enhances the whole universe because it's a new connection. And a new connection means new possibilities, new paths that you can make inside this brain. You can now create new stories. This is still quite hazy, which is why I call these sessions a brainstorm, because I'm storming my brain right now as I'm talking. And hopefully you found it interesting, and it offers yet another perspective on how this universe works, how infinity works, how everything is connected, but in a less sort of simplistic, looped kind of way, or just to say everything is linked to everything else. That's kind of a shortcut, and is very hard to imagine. Like every point of infinity is creates everything else. Okay, fine, but you still have to sort of give it a form, and giving it this form is something that we can relate to, because we sort of know how our own, well, we are starting to find out more and more about how our own brain works, which is why this metaphor I think is very useful. So feel free to leave a comment. Happy to discuss these ideas further with you, and see you at the next episode. Oh, just one last thing that I wanted to talk to you about. There's something really strange that happened to me, and that I usually would have never done. I have a laptop which I use all the time. A very good laptop. I use it for composing music, doing all kinds of things. It's really important to me. And I had to do there was a pop-up for a Windows update. I put restart now. And then for some reason that I don't understand, it restarted, and then it was updating the BIOS. And I'm very good with computers, actually. I've self-taught programming to myself. I've assembled several computers, and I usually know better. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know why it went to the BIOS, because it was a Windows update. But it was actually updating the BIOS. And the BIOS is the most fundamental. It's the most fundamental part of the computer. If you screw up the BIOS, it won't even start. Like your screen won't even turn on. The hard disk won't even be recognized. Nothing will work. It's the most fundamental piece of software that is in your motherboard. And I've interrupted the BIOS update. I've shut down my computer thinking, this is a bug or something. And upon restart, sure enough, I bricked, so-called bricked, my computer. And I've worked on it, all night. I've tried to discharge the battery completely, see if that resets the BIOS. Nothing. I'll probably have to send it to repair because I have plenty of valuable files and information on there. See if they can reset it. And so symbolically speaking, I guess, the message that the universe is trying to tell me is don't interrupt an update. I guess it's basically a symbolic for saying that we are being updated. Our interface, as I explained in other videos, is being updated. Our own bodies are being updated right now, like our DNA, and many videos explain that our DNA is being updated. And there's something very important about that update, so we better, not try to shut it down or try to do just basically, I think the idea is to let things happen. Let the update run its course, even though we may not understand what's going on. But to really make sure that it goes, it's sort of, you let it run, because otherwise you could, screw many things up. So for the coming weeks or months, I guess the message is, don't interrupt the update. Just stay with it, be patient, and the BIOS, the most fundamental piece of in our own body, in our own DNA, our DNA or whatever, is being updated. So just let it. I hope this is useful, and see you in the next video.